sure you fold it so that it's wide enough. Good, that's exactly the right amount. And this one is a little bit smaller. We'll put that there. And then this one, so as not to waste all this extra fabric, I'll do that separately. Pin these into place. And as in the previous videos, cut it. Cut it around the shape of the pattern.
You're so sweet, and we're just like, unfortunately, you have it. ¿A esa le sacó? ¿Se la queda con la madre? This is what things are doing. You're incredibly beautiful. I'm glad I am. Hey, that's nice to hear. I'm not sure if you're not going to that. It doesn't. It does get better.
Now we have the three pieces. This is the back. This is going to be the between the legs, the crotch area. And here is the front. And here is the front. Take care of your patterns. I'm being very careless, but you're going to be using, once you find a pattern that you really like, you'll be using them over and over. So be sweet with them. Here's the, actually this is the back because it's bigger, and this is the front. Now we're off to the sewing machine. My husband's on the phone, so I'm sorry for that notice. But alright, so we're going to first sew these two. This piece to this piece. Oh, what's wrong? Well, it came out a little bit bigger than I wanted. That's okay. The crotch is a little bit smaller, but that's all right. That can be fixed then when we make the hem. So, first we're going to sew along this side. Oh, when you're sewing on stretchy fabric, it's important to stretch it out as far as it will go when you sew. Because if you just sew it without stretching it, the yarn will not be long enough, and then when you put it on it will break. So stretch it as far as you can, and then sew. See how I'm stretching it? This goes the same. This is one of the ways to deal with stretchy fabric. There are other ways, but this is the way that works best for me. I stretch it as far as it'll go. So as you can see, with stretchy fabric, the seam is not as neat as with regular cotton fabric. But it's important that when you sew it, as I mentioned, stretch it really tight and then sew. That way you have enough thread and it gives. Some people like to use the zigzag. I find that the straight stitch works best for me. So anyway. So that's your seam from the outside. Now we'll do the same. We'll sew on the other side. This side will go like this, or like that. Right sides together always. Okay, back to the sewing machine, and I'll do the same thing to this side. Now, if you're a woman, you know that we often like to have kind of a cotton lining in our panties. This is plain cotton. It's actually a piece left over from my t-shirt project, the first video I made. I'm going to cut another crotch out of this and use it to line the panties. Here's the piece I just showed. Now, had I remembered to do this ahead of time, this piece is just sewn right here. You would just sew it in as if it were part of the first piece. It's like a double, but it's really no different. Maybe if you want, you can cut it a little thinner, so when you do the hems, it's a little easier to fold over. You see, it'll be like that when you hem the raw edges. But all the rest is the same. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Here then we have this shape. You know, we've sewn it's all right sides together, sewed the crotch in. Now we just do this and sew the two sides. Now remember, the back is wider than the front, so it's not going to match exactly. See, it's larger. I'll show you this way. The front is smaller than the back. So you just sew this side, and then once you've sewn that side, you'll sew this side. And it will be larger in the back. That's okay. As in all my other videos, I guess you're starting to catch on if you've watched it before. Turn it inside out. This is the basic finished product. Of course, you still have to do some hemming. I like to use the zigzag stitch for the raw edges. I fold it over. If you really want to be neat, you can fold it over twice, and then zigzag stitch all along the hems. Now, sometimes you'll find that they're larger than you expected. Maybe you calculated wrong and they're too big. No problem. You just fold over a hem on the top and stick a piece of elastic through, as I showed you in the peasant blouse video. You know, you make a hem, leave a little space, and feed a piece of elastic through. Sometimes you realize you calculated too short. There's no problem there either. All you do is then add a waistband, just a loop of fabric up on top, and add the waistband. So there are no rules. You just sort of make it as you go. Or once you get your perfect pattern that you've made, and you've made a pair that you really like, make sure you lock that pattern in a safe. Make sure you never lose it. And that's the one you'll use over and over again. When it starts to get a little crinkly, you can trace it until you have a new one. And that's basically it. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
I'm working on a customer's clerical waistcoat and I ran into some trouble on the mannequin. As you can see, it's having a lot of trouble right in front of the throat where the front button would be. You can see it bubbling out, which would look horrible on the customer. I needed to figure out why, so I did a little bit of experimentation. I smoothed the piece back from the throat back over to the shoulder area and temporarily pinned the extra fabric in place, as you can see here. Once I was satisfied that this was the locality of the fault, I went ahead and unpinned it, and then I took out the basting from the shoulder seam and smoothed the cloth back along the shoulder seam and pinned it in place. And sure enough, that's exactly what was wrong. The angle of the shoulder seam was way off. So now I have this problem with the fabric not matching by an inch. So I had to determine why this happened, and I realized that when I decided to make the front waist dart, I forgot to change the angle of the armhole, or the arm side, forward a bit. As per this diagram on the Modern Tailor Outfitter and Cutter Volume 1, when you make a front dart, you adjust by slashing a line through on the pattern up to the chest prominence area, and then make another slash here at the arm side. You change the angle of the pattern by the amount that you've taken out of the waist dart. If you don't do this, you're going to have the problem that I just ran into. So I'm going to demonstrate the importance that the front dart has, and the effect that it has on the neck point is actually what it's supposed to be called, so ignore that. Right here is the prominence of the chest, this area here. And this is the angle that the front dart is taking. And when you bring the dart in, the entire front area is going to move back and forth. It's going to essentially slide, right? So here's the blue line that shows the neutral point, and then here's where when I bring in the dart. An entire half of an inch, and that is about how far off I am on the shoulder seam. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of stretching on the fore part. Here, let me show you. So here's the section here. When I stretch this is going to come forward. Alright, well this is the fore part that I just stretched. It's upside down, of course. About 3/8 of an inch. And the amount of distance that it had an effect on was about 1/2 of an inch here on the top. Alright, so I made a gusset out of a piece of leftover canvas that I had that I used for the waistcoat itself. And I went ahead and wedged it a bit. I'm going to insert this by hand underneath the padding here. And that should take care of that issue with the canvas and make sure that that it's strengthened. Alright, there we go. Now one last thing I am going to do, and that is I'm going to put a piece of wadding on top of the area that I made the cut, and the way I'm going to reinforce it down is I'm going to take just a small piece of fusible just for this one area, trim it down, lay it over, fuse it on. Here we go. I actually went all the way over to the edge of the canvas as well to make sure it's nice and secured on there on the edge. And I'm just going to take this, press it. And there we go. Nice and secure. It's a lot flatter than it would have been. For the other shoulder gusset, I realized I was doing it the hard way. What I did was I put a piece of fusible on top with the gusset piece underneath, fused everything together, and then I went ahead and did the cross stitch on top of it. Took me about a quarter of the time. It does exactly the same job. Hello, yesterday I went ahead and stretched and put the gusset underneath the underarm area here, which points toward the prominence of the chest, which is this area here. And you can see the effect that it had. It definitely improved things a bit. It's not 100% accurate. What I'm going to do is bring in the shoulder seam a bit to make the armhole a little bit further in, because both of these have to be brought in other words, brought in like this. This is how they're going to be finished. So it's going to be about at the level of this inner line here. That's going to be the final contour. But it's a lot better. From the pictures that you just saw, these were really mismatched before, so it fixed things up tremendously.